Yeah, in general, how are things going in Idaho? Eating a lot of potatoes, I assume.
Yeah, yeah, it's been good. We're still trying to get through our remodel so we can move into the house, but so we're still living out of a suitcase, so to speak. And so that's brought us challenges. So like you have all your nice books behind you. All mine are in a box in a garage,
Wow.
except for of course, my Beyond the Basics Greek grammar.
Of course, yeah, the essentials are absolutely needed, right?
The only other book I've got out is my English grammar. So there you go.
Wow. Truly Dr. Tim Carns, right? You got all the grammar stuff right there.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of that with the guys. That I'm training, a few of the classes we've been doing some more advanced stuff with them. So, but yeah, so it's been kind of a little bit of a inconvenience trying to get, because then clothes are spread out and everything's in two locations and or boxed up, and so.
Yeah.
But everything else is going good. The kids are doing well, and been able to kind of get connected at church and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. And it sounds like things with all of your training overseas has been basically full swing. Is that right?
Yeah, more or less. I meet with 4 groups weekly. 2 of them were existing groups from before COVID that were in the midst of the 6-module training for the preaching program. So I'd still continue meeting with those groups weekly. And then a 3rd group I added during COVID was guys that had gone through the course already. And I just offered, hey, if you want to do more stuff, just kind of review or do more advanced things. So about 10 or 12 guys have joined that. So these are guys that have already gone through all the training. They're just kind of getting supplemental, like we're doing Greek participles of all things the last couple of
Wow.
weeks. So, and then a 4th group got added in October timeframe, group of guys from Malaysia and Myanmar.
Wow.
So been doing that on a weekly basis. Again, the preaching program. And then, Lord willing, next month, in a few weeks, we will get the group in Pakistan going.
Wow.
So,
Praise God. I know we kind of talked about this when you're here in person, but it sounds like just in general with everything that's been happening this last year, God has really opened up a lot more doors in terms of training overseas, right? Because of everything being over technology.
yeah, actually, it has. People are getting used to just doing things online, and so at least for the guys that have internet capability, they have adjusted to that. So yeah, like doing the group in Pakistan. Because some of the travel issues and things, but doing it online is a feasible option. We had another opportunity in Indonesia. We did a conference on preaching there a few months ago, and so that sort of turned into one of the seminary there had asked if a few of us could sort of be like a adjunct professor and teach a couple of classes there. So that might happen in the fall. But then, yeah, Malaysia opened up, Myanmar again, because doing stuff online. Of course, Myanmar's been a challenge the last couple of months because of the coup. The military government has restricted the internet. So certain times of day, they just cut it off. So
While
that's,
just nationwide, everything is kind of shut off.
well, at least in some areas where they cut off the internet providers. They just tell them shut down. So some areas it'll be up, some it'll be down, but like in the major cities, it's been more challenging.
Wow. Wow.
That's
Yeah.
another reason I record, because then those guys, if they couldn't join the course, they can at least, when they do have internet, they can access the videos.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole crazy world. Because I know even here in America, we hear about kind of what's going on in Myanmar, just through the news, BBC, whatever that might be. But it sounds like, especially the churches, then, right, they're impacted even more so.
Yeah. Yeah, the last update I sent out, the most recent one, a couple weeks ago or last week, I think, I interviewed one of the pastors, just asked for prayer requests, a key pastor there that I've been working with in Myanmar, and so he expressed some of the needs there, and that we could be praying for. But
Mhm.
just with not only the coup, I mean, that came on top of COVID, which, in these poor countries, they've been devastated by it because you shut down the country, people, just basic necessities like food and things like that. So that was already a challenge. And then now with the coup on top of that, it's really exacerbated the problems there. So this pastor I work with, he's connected with CHF, Children's Hunger Fund. So that's been a blessing for them. So they've been able to get food and distribute it to people around them as well. But
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, and I know I got to see just a little bit of the interview there, but maybe for some of our people here at Calvary that haven't had the chance to see it, would you mind just giving a brief summary of from that conversation, what exactly else has been going on, just in general for the churches and for your pastor friends specifically?
yeah, I think with Myanmar, it's kind of interesting, as I mentioned, sort of the issues with even food or basic
Mm,
necessities has been a challenge. But even the pastor there, his name's Pastor Philip, he was talking about too, just evangelistic opportunities. It's more of a challenge now because if you don't know somebody, if it's a stranger or someone unfamiliar, they really won't talk to you because
mm,
you might be from the government, and they're looking for dissidents, they're looking for anybody that's
mm,
trying to sort of trouble. So people are very afraid to talk to anyone sort of outside their inner circles.
mm,
That's been a challenge. Just gospel in the church hasn't been able to gather, partly because of COVID, but also partly because people are afraid to be out. Now if groups have gathered together, the government has coordinated snipers and other things. Just
really? Wow.
yeah, because that's if you want to instill fear, the greatest way to do that with protesters is to have snipers and just pick off
Mm,
people in the crowd, because then it could be anybody, right?
mm,
Instead of just the people up in front. And it's been a challenge for pastors there is how is the church to respond to this
mm,
obviously unjust takeover of the government. And we have our issues and we have our concerns about our government leaders, but just imagine being in their situation. And it's the same Bible, same passages. We're to submit to the governing authorities, and in their case it's an even greater unjust situation. And so
mm,
they're challenged with how do we help shepherd the people through this kind of a situation, and still maintain that submissive heart towards those in leadership, but at the same
mm,
time, the government that installed itself, isn't the
mm,
one that the people had voted for.
right.
So,
Mm,
so that creates some challenges. Then they have regular life challenges with, there, if you get COVID or any kind of health issue, medical care is a lot different than it is here. And
mm,
so, um, and even just financially, this is the case in the Philippines. If you go to, like ICU or need an extended hospital stay, that's going to bankrupt you
mm,
because they don't have the same kind of insurance system that we have here. And so that's why I think there's an even greater concern in the countries that I interact with in Asia about COVID, because even a hospital stay, even if you survive, or just the hospital bill alone can totally destroy a family's financial situation. And it
mm,
has. I know of people in
yeah.
churches there that it's done that too. So
Wow. Yeah. And I remember the last time that we were talking when you were here, you mentioned that there were some people in the Philippines that are literally eating tree bark, right? Because they either didn't have access to food or grocery system was disrupted, something like that.
yeah, probably sort of early on, when there was a real strict lockdown, some of the churches were trying to get rice and just food items out to those in the more provincial areas that are much
Mm,
poorer. But because of the restrictions, they weren't even allowed to leave their communities. So yeah, these people out in the provincial areas were scraping bark off of trees or leaves or just anything to. That was several months. That was 6 months ago. I don't know now. Like,
mm,
I can't imagine how much
mm.
worse it might be for them. So
Wow.
Yeah, it's definitely, different. So it's sobering, I think, to
Mm.
consider some of those challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know that you've been interacting a lot with pastors and teachers from all of these different countries, right, that are working in the churches. And you sort of expressed to this a little bit, but what has been some of the things that these pastors or Christians overseas have either just been encouraged by scripture, or what have they been clinging on to? Just as they're processing everything that's been happening, how have they been trying to process this biblically?
There's a range, kind of a very common term, when I ask, so how are you guys doing? How you doing? Very often you say, well, by God's grace, we are,
Mm,
doing well, or just they talk a lot about God's grace. There's a confidence and trust in the good sovereign hand of God. They've been really challenged by bringing the flock together when they've been under much more restrictions than we have, especially in the Philippines. The church gathering has been a big challenge for many churches, especially ones in the urban areas. In fact, I did a message because I'm asked sometimes to preach there, so I'll do preach online. One church, the pastor said, "Pastor, can you do a message on face-to-face fellowship?"
mm,
Because the church there had been allowed to gather, but very few people were coming. That's a common issue or concern that I've seen. A lot of the pastors have been, we've been talking about that. Just people have not been coming because of live stream or watching the recordings, and so now that some of the churches are allowed to gather, it's been a challenge having everyone return, whether they're just used to being at home, whether there's still fear about the virus, or whether just been a lot of issues and concerns there. That's been on the heart of a lot of the guys overseas.
yeah, I think what you mentioned about people just either struggling to want to get back together, or for different reasons potentially being afraid, in a lot of ways does sound like what we're kind of dealing with here in the States,
Yeah,
in terms of the response to COVID.
actually, that's a good point. Human heart, right? Doesn't matter the culture. But yeah, I think that's been a big struggle because there is a lot of fear and concern in the communities. They've wrestled with regathering, and just like I said, there is a greater concern for their health because of the implications of having to be
Mm,
hospital. I just this Monday I was speaking with some brothers from in central Philippines. One of those pastors, their brother had just died from COVID
mm,
a week before, and
mm,
so I mean it's a reality there as well. And some people have gotten. I talked to a brother last night. He has it, but he's had no symptoms or very few, so he's been fine. But then you've got this other brother who lost a family member
mm,
to it, and so that's just created heightened sensitivity within the congregations there about the virus.
mm,
And also, I don't hear a lot about concerns about government controls and things like that. Like, of course, in the States, that's a big issue. Over there, where there's been a lot more government intervention and
mm.
restrictions and control, most of the guys have not expressed a lot of issues with that, except in Myanmar, of course. That's a different
Mhm.
dynamic going on there. But so I
Yeah.
found that somewhat interesting.
Hmm.
A
Yeah. Do
lot
you think
more of
maybe
a
it's just because here in America we focus a lot more on patriotism than maybe certain other countries, or?
well, just yeah, the independence, right? I think
Mm,
in Malaysia and Philippines, I mean, sort of there's a much greater mentality in Asian countries of community, and
mm,
there's a much, I think, you could, I'm sure, speak more to this than I could, but it seems to be a greater sensitivity to the needs of the community, to respecting others in the community, and I think in here in the US it's more of an independent sort of
mm,
mindset that sort of challenge that a little bit. I don't know how to express it rightly, but
yeah. Yeah. I think what you're saying just about the spirit of independence, right? Where, hey, I have an idea of what I want to do. And, we mentioned this before, but just how much I think freedom and rights comes into the conversation.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very prevalent here in America specifically, whereas we go to Thailand, Philippines, a lot of the Asian countries, a lot of the cultural focus is a little bit different once you go over there.
Yeah, and that's something I've noticed as a generalization that fits, even in, so I'm interacting with 4 or 5 different nations.
Hmm.
whose culture, there's some similarities within Southeast Asian cultures, even in different countries, and that seems to be one of them.
Yeah, but I think like we're saying, we notice that there's so many different, kind of focuses, right, culture to culture. Just, now that you have the, because you're sort of in between two worlds, right? You're based in Boise, Idaho, right? You're here in
Yeah.
the States, and yet so much of the ministry that you're doing is with the churches and pastors overseas, right? And so I think for you, you do get to really see how all different cultures approach the Bible, right? You have the inerrant word, right? The principles are always the same, but maybe the way that each country or culture kind of fleshes it out or interprets it might be a little bit different. Just based off of kind of how you've gotten to interact with the pastors overseas, then looking back here in America, what are some of maybe if you have like those exhortations from your heart, right? But what are some of those things that you would just hope that us as American Christians can really learn, just even from the experiences that you've been having with some of these pastors, over in Asia?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess keeping the main thing. I guess seeing their concern and focus, like Pastor Philip in Myanmar, his heart is burdened for being able to communicate the gospel, proclaim the good news, even in the midst of what they are going through. And several other pastors, I mean, their focus is, how can Christ be proclaimed in the midst of this situation? And I think I'd mentioned when I was at Calvary before, just being able to interact with some of the church leaders in Pakistan, and who are facing not only COVID and not only all that's coming with that, but they're facing severe persecution, life-threatening persecution. And I've noticed just there seems to be more of a gospel or kingdom focus, where as here in the States, I think there seems to be a tendency to get so caught up in all the issues that we're losing sight of the Great Commission focus and have a good testimony. Obviously, we want to help people in their situations. Obviously, we want to extend a hand to needs. I mean, that's what Jesus did. But he was singular, right, in his focus about the kingdom of God and the need for repentance, the need for putting trust in him. And I see, I guess, more of that with the guys that I'm interacting with overseas than I am here. We have our issues in this country, and they're serious ones. They should not be ignored, especially by the church. At the same time, we can't let things hinder us or dissuade us from our main mission. I see that attitude more with the guys overseas than I do here, because they have
Yeah.
distractions too. They have hurdles too. I mean, imagine if you're living in a country where the military's taken over. You go outside, you could be shot. You don't have much food. I mean, and it's like they have their issues too that could really be a challenge in being gospel proclaimers. But there seems to still be that focus and desire to, how do I make Christ known in the midst of this situation?
Yeah, those are really, sobering encouragements. And, would you say, is it something about just when these pastors are going through these kinds of very real suffering, persecution, that kind of makes them have to focus on the main thing? Or is it because of the circumstances, right, as things are being stripped away, that you think, believers are focused, right, to really reflect and keep their eyes on Christ? Would you say that's part of the reason? Or
Wow. Obviously, if you're in a, like in Pakistan, where there is the severe persecution, more so than any of the other countries that I'm interacting with, at least, obviously that keeps them focused. But even there, one brother that I spent a lot of time with, he'll message me or contact me and just say, brother, I'm afraid, I'm discouraged, I'm depressed. I mean, he's human too. And so, I mean, he's been very transparent about with the things he's suffering, but he still recognizes that there's an enemy that's trying to thwart the gospel going out. And so he when he comes back to that, it reminds him of, but I'm here on a mission, and there is a reason I'm being persecuted. So I think in his case that can help. And in the other cases where they're just like in Myanmar, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, there is persecution that takes place, but maybe not to the same degree. But I wonder there in a lot of these cases if it's just we've been given so much in our country, in the U.S. here, for lack of a better word, we've been pampered in this
Mm,
nation. And I wonder if that's sort of desensitized us a little bit. Or Piper always talks about being careful that we aren't finding more satisfaction in the gift rather than the giver.
mm,
And
right.
maybe that's more of the case for us because we have been abundantly blessed, and we're not going through the same kinds of things as these other folks are. And maybe there's part of that going on as well, that they're able to keep their focus more easily because maybe there's fewer distractions as far as
Mm,
those kinds of things. But I
right,
don't know.
right.
I don't know. That's just, I have to think about that a little more. But
Mm. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we know that as a general principle, right? Prosperity tends to breed malaise in a lot of ways, where more stuff you have, right? You have more shiny toys before you, and more things that could distract you away from focusing really on Christ. And yeah, even in the American church, whether it's building projects or just how do you respond to different cultural things, we have so many, I think, things that are trying to grab our attention. Whereas I think for what you're saying for some of these pastors, right, there are fewer kind of distractions, and plus obviously the reality of suffering. And I think of even Matthew 5, right, where Jesus says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted, right, for righteousness' sake." And I think it's when you're going through those hard times, it just forces you to, yeah, I think focus on what's important, right, which I think is a lesson we really need here in the States.
yeah, I mean, Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount, even later, right? Didn't Jesus say, where your treasure is, there your heart will also be? So also that
Mm,
idea of not only the persecution side, but the blessing side. And
mm,
if we're given many blessings, we have to be careful, where are we investing ourselves in our things and what God has given. And if we have fewer things, maybe we aren't as consumed by what I
mm.
do with those things. So that obviously would be a part of it as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great kind of reflection for even all of us here at Calvary, right, or all of the listeners here in the States, of just what objects or what distractions do I have that could be taking my focus off of Christ. And yeah, I think everything you've been sharing about what's been happening for the pastors overseas, yeah, is a good sobering encouragement reminder of how necessary that is.
Yeah, and just in thinking about it, Alex, the Sermon on the Mount, I think, speaks to a number of the challenges in the States, especially, we've been facing. We talk about our rights, we talk about independence, we talk, remember Jesus addressed that as well, right? With,
Mm,
if someone slaps you on the cheek, turn the other one. If someone demands your coat, give them your tunic. If someone tells you to carry their pack for a mile, practice the Roman soldiers would do. They would
mm,
force. He says go a second mile. So this idea even of rights and what's more important, that's addressed in the Sermon on the Mount. So
mm,
there's a lot of elements, I think, that Jesus could speak to regarding not only the American church but also churches around the world. But I think it's
mm,
especially the American church, as far as what really matters right now.
mm,
Obviously, the enemy is very good at distracting us. If he can't keep you from heaven, he's going to try to do all he can to keep you from holiness, to keep you from
mm,
proclaiming the gospel. I think he's been doing a pretty good job at with the American church and distracting us away from our
mm,
mission. And again, not to dismiss the issues, but just how we approach those issues and what is our filter and focus as we approach those issues. Is it to fix this problem, or is it to bring them to Christ, who will in him be able to address this problem, either by fixing it or by giving peace and contentment in the midst of it? Or
mm,
so
mm. No, that's so helpful. And yeah, I hope that that even exhortation helps whoever in Calvary would be listening to this, and just making sure the main thing is the main thing, and not focusing on all these periphery issues, for sure. Just as we're kind of wrapping up, I know you're going to continue to be very busy with this kind of work that you're doing, right, with the pastors and with the training. You might have shared this a little bit before, and maybe some of the smaller videos we've done, or newsletters here at the church. But what are some of the things that we can be praying for, or what are some of these new opportunities that you're looking forward to, just in terms of ministry, and now God is going to allow just even this move to technology to further enhance the kind of kingdom work that you're able to do.
yeah, thank you. I think, I've appreciated that we have the technology, and it's allowed for some training to happen when, 10 years ago, it probably couldn't have. At the same time, I really am yearning to be face to face with these guys, because one, just I think instruction happens much better when you're together because there's an organic nature to it, and a
Right.
dynamic, obviously, that's even just what we're doing. I mean, that's good, but I think it'd be a little different if we were sitting in the same room together. But I think especially with instruction, face to face is better. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. Just pray the Lord would open up windows and doors for that. I'm hoping to be in Pakistan in September, and then Asia maybe in the fall, later fall, if things can open up. Right now there's restrictions, so just pray, I guess, for those restrictions to be lifted, that I could be able to travel and be there. But also, too, being there, there's just an element, and we've experienced this here with not being able to gather, and now that we can, just sort of that face-to-face interaction. Just there's a different dynamic, even with fellowship and the gifts and the one anothering. A lot of these pastors, just for them to be able to gather together and for us to interact is really helpful to them, because in a lot of cases they're by themselves, in a sense, in a lot of these churches, where there may not be other elders, there may not be other men they can go to for advice or counsel or just fellowship, accountability. And so being able to be there and kind of draw them in together is an important thing. So that's a long way just to say, praying that I can be traveling soon. Pray for me just in perseverance, and for the guys. I think some of the guys are zoomed out, they're just kind of it's Zoom fatigue is not just an American thing. So like one of the groups, it's been harder for them, I think, to be consistent with that. I think some of them are just, it's been a challenge. So, and Wi-Fi too. A lot of these guys, their Wi-Fi is not consistent. So I guess just prayer for them to be sustained in the midst of this, as we are doing online stuff, that they would maintain diligence there and faithfulness. Pray too for me for wisdom as I interact with them, because it's not just instruction in Greek grammar or whatever that I'm doing. A lot of times, like last night, an issue came up about elders and their children. Is an elder qualified if his child isn't a believer? And so we spent the whole time just discussing that aspect. And a few weeks ago, we were talking about suicide, and that just, the whole time we discussed, how do you deal with that if a person's struggling with suicide? How do you help a family if a family member has killed themselves? Can a person be a Christian if they have committed suicide? And so these pastoral types of issues come up quite often. And so there's a mentoring going on as well through these times. And so just pray for me for wisdom, not only in the instruction, but also in being an encouragement and a help to them in these ways. And prayer for preparation, especially for Pakistan. There's a lot of stuff I need to get ready, as far as I have to modify the courses we're doing something a little different as far as the format there. So they'll be doing like a 3-day session. So I'll be late night, early mornings online with them, and I got to get the materials ready. So I guess those three things, being able to physically gather, that the Lord would provide that opportunity, just wisdom and preparing not only instruction, but also the shepherding aspects, mentoring aspects. And then thirdly, just for Pakistan and preparing for that. And then protection for the pastors, especially in Myanmar and Pakistan, who are, in some dangerous situations.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing all of that. It's yeah, I think it's definitely a lot to take in, right? It's not even for myself, but I'm sure for all of us here in the States as we hear that. But at the same time, I think it's such an encouragement to see the opportunities that God is doing and giving you to, potentially be able to go back in person and to, minister to these men even more so, right? Because, you think about here, us at Calvary, right? We have a number of pastors and elders, and you have that kind of encouragement, exhortation. But to imagine being that kind of situation, right? Being the one pastor in the midst of a country that's persecuting, yeah, it's a whole different world. And so I know I'll continue to be praying for that, and I hope that all of our members here at the church will do that as well. So
that'd be great. And just even to thinking about, the training you've received, Alex, the training I've received, and even the pastors at Calvary. And a lot of these guys that I've interacted with, especially in Pakistan and some of these countries, they just do not have any access to this kind of training or much training at all. And so somebody teaching a Sunday school class at Calvary might, in some cases be more equipped than many of these pastors. And not because these guys are lazy or don't care. They desperately want to be faithful to God's word and his people. They just don't have the opportunity and the access to training. So I'm really excited about this opportunity in Pakistan. I really see that can be something really helpful to the men there and the churches eventually, right? Because if you affect the pulpit, you affect the church. So
yeah, and Lord willing, whenever that happens, it would be great to kind of hear an update, right, of just how God's been working and used you and other people to facilitate the gospel overseas.
Amen.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, Tim, thank you so much just for taking this time to have this conversation. I know it's always weird when you're kind of doing it virtually, but yeah, it's great that the Lord allows us to even have this chance to still touch base and say hi.
Agreed. And all my brothers and sisters at Calvary, we really do miss you. Our hearts are there. I keep calling, people talk to me about, where I go to church. I keep saying, yeah, my church is doing well. We just added a new oh, wait a minute. That's Calvary. We definitely, you are family. And I know we're fellowshipping at another location now, but we do continue to receive prayer requests and from the Calvary is being sent to us and praying for you. And our hearts are knit together, and they will be till we die. So just want to thank you so much for the support and encouragement. Thank you, Alex, for even just the opportunity for reaching out to me and setting this up, and just very thankful.
Yeah, of course. And looking for the next time you guys visit. It'll be great to treat you guys for dinner or something.
Oh, hey, there you go. Yeah, we missed some good Mexican food up here in sushi, man. It's been rough up here.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
We got potatoes though, but hey,
Yeah, French fries, mashed potatoes, whatever kind of potato. But yeah. So that's even more so reason hopefully visit sometime soon, right? Treat you to a taco. Yeah. Awesome. All right, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
All right, Alex. Good talking with you.
Yeah.